All right. Mr. Robison, Ms. Jameson, you're present for Mr. Robison.
There is one matter I wanted to just clarify before the court imposes sentence. There was some discussion during counsel's argument on Friday, and there was a sort of a disagreement between Mr. Hutton and the defense's representation in terms of the status of any negotiations previously. And while absolutely in no way binding on the court, I do think since this was a plea and not a loss at trial, it does bear some relevance. I think the defense's representation was that the state agreed they would quote work the case out for a number in the 4 with this starts with 4. Mr. Hutton's response was no, that wasn't so. He said come to the state with a number that starts with a 5. I was able to actually locate that email thread, and I think both versions have some bit of correctness. The email exchange was that Mr. Hutton said, come to the state of Florida with a number that starts with a 4, and I will have a serious conversation with the family. So I just wanted to clear that up because there was a disagreement amongst both sides in terms of the status of any previous negotiations.
And then, but ultimately there was no meeting of the minds, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Robison, I've taken the time to consider the evidence that was presented during the course of the sentencing hearing. And I will say, just because there is a time lapse in between when we actually did this proceeding and now the sentencing date, I will reaffirm the court's findings related to the habitual felony offender status. That is, I did find that the 2 exhibits, both being judgment and sentences, have not been set aside, nor that has there been a pardon related to the 2 prior convictions. They do satisfy the statute pursuant to 775.084 of the Florida statutes, where the state is seeking to have the exposure on the cases that are not life felonies doubled. And this court does in fact find the state did meet its burden by proving by a preponderance of the evidence that you do meet the criteria. Additionally, based upon your previous record and the facts and circumstances of the instant case, the court does find that you shall be designated as a habitual felony offender for the protection of the community. And I know that was a stipulated thing, but I wanted to say it for the record because those 2 things, those findings were made at 2 separate dates. And so I'm going to go to first the Jackson family, which I believe all the families. What really struck me is that no matter what side of the aisle you were sitting on the day that it happened, it seemed as though everyone was trying to do the best for their child. And I will say to the Jackson family, I sit through a lot of sentencings. I do a lot of sentencings. And what happened last Friday is slightly rare, which is that you had families that have a loved one that has done something terrible and devastating, acknowledge your grief. The reason why I point it out is because I think everyone sitting on the sidelines watching or learning of what unfolded on that terrible night all wishes that it would have somehow you have a rewind button and it all go away. It's some terrible nightmare for the Jackson family that they can't ever wake up from. And all families expressed extreme remorse for what happened. And so, Mr. Robison, I do believe that what you expressed was, in fact, remorse. I don't have any doubt about that. What I found in your statement and the statement of your mother, well, let me start with you. I found that you were very articulate. You seem smart. And I know that you were pointing the finger at drugs and whatever else got in your way. But I'm not sure why you started making the decisions you made. It seemed to me that if you had focused that energy another direction, that you could have been successful. But those are all quote unquote what ifs. What if you had done something differently? This court has to look at what you did do. And so, in your very short life, you have ended up with 2 criminal convictions. When you get out of prison, when you were in prison, somehow you associated yourself with the worst of the worst, which are criminal gangs, which I'm well aware are rampant in the criminal justice system and the Department of Corrections. When you got out, you then associated yourself with people that you were incarcerated with. That absolutely makes no sense to me. You are blaming Miss Bule for getting an AR-15. And I can't think of a worse decision on your part. There are a million different ways that you could have got money. And when I say a million different ways, there are probably a million jobs out there that wanted to give you a second chance. Okay. And you decided that you were going to, quote unquote, target a drug dealer that you didn't think was going to report the incident. And instead, you murdered someone. So this is what I said to Mr. Randolph. Then I will say to you, I hope that you learned something during the sentencing hearing. I hope you learned that that person that you had no idea about that was sitting in that chair that you shot 4 bullets into had the world in the palm of his hand. I hope that you learned that he was actually doing something with his life and he wasn't slinging drugs. He was over there to play video games on his friend's birthday. I hope that weighs heavy on you, heavy like a ton of bricks. And I looked at all those certificates and you say you take a class every day. You talked to this court about the divine. I'm not even close, okay? But there is punishment there. And I can't give you any grace. What you did was so terrible and so reprehensible. And the fact that you're saying, this is the one thing I find not credible. I believe you are remorseful. I cannot believe on any given day of the week that you were just randomly firing. No way. There was not one stray bullet. There were 4 shots, 4 hits that ripped that man's body apart. No way. Based upon your pleas of guilty to the lesser included offense of murder in the 2nd degree, this court, and also your plea of guilty to attempted armed robbery and to armed burglary and to possession of a firearm by convicted felon, this court will adjudicate you guilty as to each offense. As to count one, this court will sentence you to your natural life in the Department of Corrections. I'll give you credit for 518 days that you've already served. This sentence, you are designated, as I've previously stated, as a habitual felony offender. The sentence shall be served also with the 25-year minimum mandatory pursuant to 775.0872A3. As to count two, the court will sentence you to 30 years in the Florida State Prison, giving you credit for 518 days that you've already served. That sentence shall be as a habitual felony offender with a 25-year minimum mandatory. As to count three, this court will sentence you to your natural life in the Department of Corrections with 518 days that you've already served. I'll give you credit for. You shall be designated as a habitual felony offender. You shall serve this sentence with a 25-year minimum mandatory pursuant to 775.0872A3. And as to count four, I will sentence you to 30 years in the Florida State Prison as a habitual felony offender with 518 days that you've already served, a 3-year minimum mandatory pursuant to 775.087. I must impose, and I will, $518 in court costs, a $100 court-appointed attorney fee, and a $50 application fee. Do you want me to appoint the public defender to represent you for appeal?
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll appoint the public defender to represent you. Thank you.
For those counts to run?
Yes, they'll run concurrently with each other. Thank you for that. Your life history, Mr. Randolph, and I've thought about what you were faced with. And when I say faced with, no one gets to choose what type of family that they're born into. What I'm also left with is the tremendous sacrifice and love and pouring into you that your grandparents did. It was very evident to me that whatever shortcomings your father had, your grandfather stood in those shoes. And what struck me is his testimony where he said, if you wanted something, you could have it. And it sounded to me that even when you had missteps in your life and you got involved in the criminal justice system, that while you were out with Miss McKenzie and things fell apart there, that you could have always turned to him. And I'm not exactly sure why you didn't. I think that that was probably, if I had to say there was a crossroads in your life, that was it. Instead, you chose to reconnect with people that were incarcerated with you, that were out getting drugs. And I listened to your explanation as to why you would enter into somebody else's house, regardless of whether they were slinging marijuana and getting drug money or not, that maybe you wouldn't get caught. I also looked at your history, which I'm required to, with the criminal justice system. And while you started out with petty crimes, you got caught with a gun. And then in this case, you used a gun. And when I say used it, I mean that you somehow got yourself out of that car with Mr. Robison, lingered at the bottom of those stairs, and then walked up those stairs. I couldn't even imagine what was going through your brain when you walked into that apartment. You, sir, deserve every single day of the rest of your natural life in prison. You deserve it. Okay? Let's not make any mistake about that. This is your saving grace. Number one is that somehow when you get caught, you cooperate. I put a premium on that. Number two is that you didn't pull any trigger. And for whatever reason, in that split second, you decided you were going to turn around and run. But I cannot ignore, and you must be punished. That's what the law is for. You must be punished for your actions. You must be, and it must be commiserate with, means consistent with the fact that your pattern of criminal behavior is increasing in nature. You are dangerous when you're left to your own devices. There's no doubt about that. The state of Florida could have filed, but they didn't. I'm assuming because of your cooperation that you're a habitual felony offender, that you had just gotten out of prison, that you, on that charge that they indicted you on, would spend every day of your life in a prison cell. And so I've considered all of those things. So I've determined that the appropriate sentence, which I'm going to announce before I do, and when you go off and you live the rest of your life, I hope it's impressed upon you what your actions, and when I say actions, because you can't say that you didn't do anything. Ms. Schlack said that she took painstaking time in explaining to you what the principal theory is. That means if you're in for a little, you're in for the whole thing. It does it, and if you just assisted by word or act, that means that you are just as responsible as if you pulled the trigger. And so I hope you learned something about Mr. Jackson. I hope that you learned that he was a man that had the world literally in the palm of his hand. I hope it will impress upon you what his mom said, which is she doesn't know what he would be, but he was going to be everything to her. Okay? You, through your actions, took something so precious from this world. A woman's only son. Based upon your plea of guilty to the lesser included offense of second-degree murder, Florida Statute 782.04, subsection 2, and your plea of guilty to attempted armed robbery, count 2 of the indictment, and then also count 4 of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Does the state have an announcement as it relates to count 3? The court will adjudicate you guilty as to counts 1, 2, and 4. As to count 1, the court will sentence you to 40 years in the Florida State Prison, giving you credit for 517 days that you've already served. The sentence shall carry with it a 10-year minimum mandatory for the possession of a firearm pursuant to 775.0872A1. As to count 2, for attempted armed robbery, you'll be sentenced to the statutory maximum of 15 years in the Florida State Prison with credit for 517 days that you've already served. The 10-year minimum mandatory will carry with it with the 775.087 of the Florida statutes. As to count 4, the court will sentence you to the statutory maximum of 15 years in the Florida State Prison, giving you credit for 517 days that you've already served with a 3-year minimum mandatory pursuant to 775.087. Each one of the sentences shall run concurrently with each other. The court will impose court costs in the amount of $518, a $100 court-appointed attorney fee, a $50 application fee. Does the state have an announcement on the other case? They've dropped the other case. Do you want me to appoint someone for purposes of appealing your sentence?
Oh, yes, no.
I'll appoint the office of the public defender to appeal your sentence. Thank you. The moment that I heard what was involved in this case on Friday, I've been thinking about what would be appropriate. And then between that time and this time, there was some fill in the blanks. Ms. Bule, you were slightly a mystery to me, other than the fact that if you listen to what Robison said about you, he would indicate that you were the cause of all of his problems. You should know that. The reason why I say you should know that is because it seems like your parents are good people that they tried very hard, that when you weren't hooked on drugs, that you were a good person. I think you still are. You have an addiction that is tremendously terrible. You should know that the person that you felt sorry for, the person you wanted to help, the person that stole your money, the person that impregnated you, the person that you gave a gun to, the person that shot and killed an innocent person blames you. Now, I listened to you. You blame him. So, what's the real answer? The real answer is that the combination of you two was toxic. That's a combination. You were making choices, he was making choices, and the combination of your combined choices ended a man's life. I can appreciate what your dad has to say, and I can also appreciate what your mom has to say. For the life of me, and I'm sure it perplexes them, that the drugs that got you and landed you a person that is standing before me with no criminal record, that all of these things came from drugs. And then you almost killed yourself in the jail with drugs. Your life is worth more than that. You should know that. What you decide to do with the time that you're about to get, that's up to you. If I were you, I wouldn't make the same choices. I wouldn't hang around the same people. Even when it's tough, that shows what your character truly is. I said it to Randolph. I said it to Robison. I'm going to say it to you. I hope that Friday you were educated and you learned something about that young man that was sitting in that chair. I hope that you learned something about him. I hope that it weighs heavy on you, what you were involved in. Now, I've got to weigh what you did, which was terrible. Okay. It's so terrible that the law says that you deserve, okay, not, you deserve every single day of life in prison. You understand that. Okay. You deserve every single day. So I have to think about what did you do after you were caught to substantially assist. And I agree, I legally could do it. Okay. Now, this is what I think about your assistance. Okay. I think that you were captured on video. It was you. I believe that the people in that apartment knew you. Okay. They didn't necessarily know the other people because they had COVID masks on and everything else. They knew you. You, I'm not exactly sure why you didn't figure it out as being a decoy. You were always going to be held responsible for this 100%. They knew you. They were going to identify you. You were caught on a Ring video. You were never going to escape this. Your only hope would be that the drug dealer did not report you and just took the loss. That would be the only hope, that you would not come to this courtroom with these types of charges. Meaning, and when I say these types of charges, forget about the murder. The moment that those two loomed in, okay, that were looming downstairs and came in with those guns, that in and of itself is a life felony. Okay. You were always going to be caught for that. Number two is, this is what I think about your cooperation, is I know it's hard. Okay. I'm well aware of that. I know that they get threats in the jail. I know that you could have changed your story, especially about someone that you may love, that's the father of your child. I know that was hard. Okay. So I'm thinking about that. The family of the Jackson family, they're 100% right. But for you, this would not occur. But for you, okay, you have to pay for that. Okay. So you deserve life. I'm not going to give you life. Okay. You don't deserve, I'm not going to give you 7, 10, what your attorney said. Okay. I think that your cooperation was substantial. The reason why I asked the question is because, generally speaking, women like you that get yourself involved in this and you don't have any real contact with the criminal justice system, you change your mind, you waver, you write silly letters to the person that you love, and then you backtrack because you didn't, you're going to get the benefit of that. But you also have to be punished for the fact that you were never going to get away with this ever in a million years. Okay. You just never were. Based upon your plea of guilty to the lesser included crime of second-degree murder, this court now adjudicates you guilty of that crime. I'll sentence you to 20 years in the Florida State Prison, giving you credit for 519 days that you've already served. Does the state have an announcement as to count 2? Then I'm going to impose the court cost of $518 and when you were retained, a $50 application fee. She has that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. And Your Honor, also that was based off an amended information, not a lesser included.
Okay, strike that then. Your plea of guilty to the amended information of second-degree murder. What's the state going to do about the other case?
Your Honor, in light of the court sentence, we will go across the third.
Do you want me to appoint an attorney for appeal? Yes.
For the purpose of it.
All right, I'll appoint an attorney for the purposes of appeal. Thank you. Court's adjourned.